I'm Dr. Hilary Weeks. I'm Senior Lecturer in English Literature at the University of Gloucestershire, and it's a great pleasure today to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Aidan Byrne, Senior Lecturer in English Literature and Media at the University of Wolverhampton. And Aidan today is going to talk to us about a very interesting, very unusual research project. Well, unusual to me, I'm a Victorianist, an unusual research project on Doctor Who, a Foucaultian reading of Doctor Who that you produced with Dr. Mark Jones also. Can you start by talking a little bit about that?
Okay, Mark and I realised that the mirror universe concept appeared in popular culture in the UK in the same week with the broadcast of an episode of Doctor Who and an episode of Star Trek in 1972. The Star Trek episode's called Mirror Mirror, and Doctor Who one's called Inferno. So they're taking the same basic premise, which had been floating around in science for quite a long time, but had only really appeared in popular culture in the 1960s and in TV popular fiction in the late 60s. And both episodes had the major protagonists who we're familiar with, the Doctor, Spock, Kirk, etc., thrust into an evil mirror universe of their own existence. So the Enterprise had its counterpart in the Imperial fleet, and Doctor Who turned up in the mirror universe, and there is the equivalent of his fairly benevolent unit military setup has become a fascist organisation. So what we have is an American and a British version of the same trope, and they work through the politics of it in very interesting ways. And Mark and I thought that Foucault's idea of internalising disciplinary control and ideology worked out differently in these two episodes, and there was a noticeable difference between the American and the British conceptualisations of what the enemy is or the other is.
Well, that's
and
fascinating.
How it works out in practice.
Sorry, very briefly, I know it's complicated to sum that up in about a minute. What basically were the differences between the American and the UK versions of this?
The American version, it promoted the Federation that we're all familiar with as a liberal, loving, kind institution, and its opposite was a violent, anarchistic institution. The Empire relies on individual self-interest to survive, so it encourages promotion by assassination, for instance. So, in a sense, my argument, following Foucault, Marx says this is fascism, but I disagree. My argument is that if you follow Foucault's approach, the Federation is actually a far more malign influence, because it wants you to internalise its values. In the so-called evil alternative, it doesn't care what you think. The Empire doesn't care what you think, as long as you behave.
Kind of shades of Orwell.
Absolutely. So the Federation, in a sense, is a much more... I'm not sure the word. It gets into your head. It isn't content with obedience. It wants acceptance and assimilation.
Curious trope, a cultural trope there
I think so.
Connected perhaps to the pursuit of happiness. You need to love what you need to not only embrace it but to love it as well.
Absolutely, and has got shades of Orwell, but it's also got shades of Foucault's concept of governmentality and discipline, whereas the Empire is simply a completely comprehensible and straightforward exercise of violence, state-sanctioned violence, but the anarchism of it allows for other forms of self-interest.
So discursively, it's embedded in the unconscious as well. So, so there is self-surveillance as well.
And so the Doctor Who version is very much more rooted in post-Second World War. It's not really a Cold War text, even though it's 1972. It looks back to Oswald Mosley and the Nazis as well. And the Doctor is a form of anarchist.
Right. Yes.
And gradually he weakens the resolve of some of these fascists, and the setup is that both worlds are threatened with destruction, but the fascist world actually is destroyed, so the audience gets to enjoy the spectacle of Earth being destroyed without it being the real one, so you get a degree of dramatic danger without having to jeopardise your familiar characters. But it shows the mirror universe is so rigid that it cannot survive because people have internalised discipline to such an extent that they're incapable of individual genius to some extent. Whereas back in the supposed real world of Doctor Who, these people are flexible, so they survive. So it's an attack on rigid power structures, and it promotes ad hoc solutions in a way that neither Star Trek Mirror Universe or the real Star Trek universe, if you can use that phrase.
Yes, well, I know what you mean. Yes, by the real.
Yeah,
yes.
it promotes bumbling along and alteration, and it promotes expertise over hierarchy and discipline. So it's very different from the Star Trek universe.
Yes, I can see.
And it's kind of, it was tempting to say it's a very English mode of doing it. Or
You
how the
know,
English like to see themselves.
I was going to say it's almost like Star Trek rewritten by Oliver Postgate, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Perfectly as well.
Yeah, it promotes the virtues of improvisation in a way that Star Trek as this product of American Cold War imperialism can't do.
And slightly more optimistic as well than than that Foucaultian frame. Well, I think Oliver Postgate and Star Wars is a fairly good way to end this conversation.
Bagpuss and Doctor Who should be next.
Absolutely perfect. Aidan, thanks very much.